We want to welcome John Hewlett to the podcast today. He is the founder of Sanacor International, the manufacturer and distributor of Cardio Miracle. John Hewlett has dedicated his life to sharing the nitric oxide discovery and the Cardio Miracle formula with those who are suffering from the disease of health-ravaging effects from the loss of nitric oxide. Can get a little bit of a tongue twister there, can it? He enthusiastically shares the news about the miraculous ability of nitric oxide in the arteries, veins, capillaries to reduce and even reverse the effects of age-related disease. John considers this his life calling and a mission to help people overcome disease and enjoy life to the fullest. So we want to welcome you, John, out to the podcast today.
Yep, thanks so much for being on.
I just don't think people really realize, because you're the nitric oxide guy here, I don't think people really realize what nitric oxide is and how it can affect your body.
Yeah, so if you can give it just a quick definition or brief explanation of what that is so people kind of have a baseline before we kind of go into this.
I determined that nitric oxide was important to everyone and that you could create nitric oxide by amino acids, arginine, citrulline, ornithine, carnitine, and also from beets, carrots, kale, spinach, even noni fruit has has a benefit of stimulating nitric oxide. The challenge is, Dr. Shane and Liz, the challenge is extending nitric oxide safely. And so now, here we are, 2022, there's almost 200,000 studies on the importance of nitric oxide to the body. And they basically are saying it's important for everything, every functional aspect of the body is impacted.
And the sad thing is medical still, with even all those studies, they still don't even look at it as something that they're incorporating into their heart disease protocol and everything
exactly
else. That's what's sad about this whole thing. So this was about 15 years ago, you said?
Correct.
And see, that seems to me about the time that I remember first hearing about it. And it seemed like there was a whole bunch of, like you said, MLMs that came out that were nitric oxide based and things like that.
The first one was actually Herbalife with Dr. Ignero, one of the Nobel Prize people. And he started the ball rolling. And then the most prominent one was the one that I got involved with was with Nature Sunshine and Synergy, which had a very good product called Pro-Arginine. And that's the one actually that helped
I remember hearing that.
my health. And so I worked with them for several years and then made a lot of suggestions. I'm the one who said, take the sucralose out and put in stevia. And they thought I was crazy. They said, well, our scientists say that sucralose is fine. I said, that's fine, but people involved in health don't want to have sucralose. It tastes good, but it doesn't, it has some chemical issues and potential issues that we can't probably talk about. But so I was the one pushing them to do a lot of things. So I became one of the top spokesmen and top advocates. But to me, it was all about the mission of nitric oxide and not about the money, because I'd always made plenty of money. And I made plenty of money there. But over a couple of about five years, I finally, I became frustrated that they didn't want to stay up with the existing science because beets had become prominently involved as a secondary nitric oxide pathway. Super beets have actually done a really good job in elevating the knowledge of nitric oxide because most people see all the ads on television. But what happens is that most fruits, vegetables, and amino acids stimulate your cell to make nitric oxide for 2 to 4 hours. And in order to have a therapeutic effect on the lining of the artery and the plaque buildup and the viscosity of your blood and all of this peripheral artery inflammation, you need to have nitric oxide safely for 12 to 24 hours. And so when I got involved, I knew nothing about physiology. I mean, obviously, I don't look like Jack LaLanne or Tony Robbins. So I'm just a guy who happened to have my life turned around by nitric oxide. And then it became my mission. And so I've been, studying it day and night for, 16 years. And so because of that, I'm now considered arguably the common sense Johnny Appleseed or nitric oxide expert because I've devoted my life to it. And so 9 years ago, I walked away from another 7-figure income and said, I guess I have to do this myself. And so I talked to the top scientists, the top doctors, the top nutritionists, and found out that I knew more than they did, strangely enough, about how to connect the dots. And so I'm just a dot connector. I didn't originate anything. I didn't invent nitric oxide. I didn't know the value of selenium. I mean, Robert Bell knows 100 times more about that. And Mike Adams knew a lot more about silica than I ever did. And other people know a lot about organic fruits and vegetables and astragalus root and Panax ginseng. So over the course of time, the last 9 years, I had formulated this product after having listened to some really smart people. And instead of having 10 or 15, good ingredients, I wanted to have 50 plus great ingredients. And so I've created this very, very top-notch, expensive ingredient product that I decided that the only way I could provide that kind of value or product that had to go direct to the public. So we have it on Amazon and we have it direct to the consumer. And that way we were able to cut out all of the excess compensation, and we didn't have to have a big fancy building with our name on it or whatever. We could put all the money in the product and the research. And so I've spent probably $1.5 million over the last 4 years on getting the highest level of scientific validation of what nitric oxide does, because my goal is to have to be accepted by the mainstream. I don't care about the mainstream, but I want it to be bulletproof from the mainstream aspect of being the nutritional bridge between a natural product that is healthy for you, no side effects, no synthetic ingredients, that could be mainstream in helping to heal the hearts and the cells and the inflammatory condition of mankind. So that's been my mission for the last 9 years, and it's getting more and more exciting because now we're getting scientific papers published on our product specifically over the last couple of years, which is shocking the industry, because most of the time people were afraid to do it because they said, well, what if this product we're selling, we do this scientific validation and we find out that it's not as good as we say it is? And when people used to say that to me, I said, I want to know. I'm not wasting my time here. I want to make sure that whatever I do is the best of the best, and that makes that statement to the world, and that we're now finding it being embraced by people who are a lot smarter than me. And they're kind of...
Well, you obviously knew that it was effective. You when people would ask that question, you probably knew deep inside that's not going to happen because I know the effects and I've already done the study. Now, if I remember, aren't there 3 different types of nitric oxide? And one's inflammatory, and there's like NOS, and I'm just going back in my memory here.
There's primarily endogenous, which is created in the arterial wall. There's like iNOS, eNOS, and CNOS,
right.
and whatever. But the reality is the inducible is sort of one that you create like wearing a mask. In fact, what's been interesting, Shane, is that during this pandemic, whatever the source is, I have my own viewpoint of that, but it has brought nitric oxide to the forefront because the pharmaceuticals, there's companies right now in multi-million-dollar clinical trials spending a fortune to get FDA approved endogenous, essentially inducible nitric oxide that you take through a CPAP for like $4,000 in the hospital. And so what's happened? So it's comical to observe this, because there was a study in Israel, one in Italy, that basically said give people a couple of grams of arginine and they were getting released out of the hospital within a couple of days with the symptoms of this whatever's gone on the last couple of years. And so they saw people who weren't getting the arginine staying in the hospital, getting sick and dying, mostly from the protocol, in my opinion. But the others who were taking the arginine were coming out of the hospital. And same thing in Brazil. So all the countries outside of the U.S. are trying to figure out, how do we elevate people's nitric oxide? Because think about it, it's only logical. And I'm just the logical guy. I'm not the biochemist. The logic is, if you relax a capillary, you're going to get more blood flow and more oxygen. I mean, that's just common sense. If you have a restriction like on a hose or it's frozen, you don't get any flow of the water. Well, the same thing is true with your capillary. So if you end up relaxing a capillary, and now I've got a phone ringing that I thought I turned off. Just a second, sorry. I mean, seriously, technology is like my biggest enemy on earth. So I hate to say that, but here, I'll leave that over there. So let's see if I can get back into square here. I didn't bring my stamp. So here we have the pharmaceutical companies killing themselves, trying to jump on this new financial treatment, $3,000-$4,000 a day for 10 days to blow nitric oxide down your nose, which they don't even have technicians who know how to regulate it. And just like the problems that we saw with some of the protocols when people unfortunately went on the ventilator, what happened? Not a lot of good outcomes from my observation, but I'm not making a medical.
We had to get them out to everybody, and that was the problem,
and
right?
Shane's cousin was actually the first one in Utah to pass away from the ventilator.
From COVID. It happened after he was released from the hospital the day after because of
The
blood.
ventilator.
And
And
I lost one of my best friends. I lost one of my heroes, Tony Ingle. Other people, one of my buddies. I saw so many tragic outcomes from people who unfortunately ended up in the hospital for whatever reason. And most of the time, what was it? It was that their oxygen levels were dropping. Well, they were dropping for a very good reason. Whatever was going on in this last couple of years was attacking the endothelium. That's what it was designed to do, whatever it is. So when you damage the lining of the artery, bad things happen. They start leaking. Well, common sense would say, oh, maybe that's why people are having thousands of blood clots that are having a problem with whatever this pathogen was. So when you look at all of those things, this was an attack. This was a direct hit, virus, non-virus, bioweapon, whatever you want to claim that it is, on the lining of the artery. That's how important the endothelial lining is its importance to the whole system. It's peripheral artery disease. It's delivery of nutrients to the mitochondria throughout the entire body. And so what's happened is we've seen this huge elevation of knowledge with people that are now concerned with, I guess I need to know what my vitamin D levels are. I guess I ought to elevate my nitric oxide. Well, if nitric oxide is the spark of life in the cell, and if nitric oxide is the miracle molecule that regulates the nutrition and the oxygen in your body, then it's darn important. And so my mission has been to tell people, you need to safely elevate your nitric oxide if you want to have a healthy, functioning endocrine system, cardiovascular system, neurological system, pulmonary breathing system. If you want to have that, you need to make sure that your nitric oxide levels are safely, adequately elevated to help support your immune system to fight off what's going on in society today.
So now you had mentioned a little bit earlier, you said about with the nitric oxide that you have to have it only lasts for so long in your system. Is that
Correct.
right? So does that mean then you have to have something that's going to be throughout the day?
So
you can keep that 12 hours or
question. See, this is where when people understood the science of nitric oxide, when it first was awarded the Nobel Prize in 1998, first people to jump on it were the bodybuilders. They said, this helps the pump. This builds up my muscles. This gives me more blood flow. This helps me sexually, whatever.
Well, and that's what I was going to say. Like when I remember back 15 years ago when we first started hearing about it, one of the things that people talk about is because that's when Viagra came out.
Viagra, yeah.
And they said this is a natural Viagra because it increases blood flow. So I've actually used it in my patients with peripheral neuropathy.
Well, exactly.
We've used nitric oxide because it helps with blood flow, right?
There were studies in South America the last year or two where people were using it to treating of the pathogen because it was elevating nitric oxide. But it elevates it synthetically. Essentially, it's calling upon the body to bring it all into the place, and then it starts. So you bring up a high elevation and then it drops off. And so if you're not reinforcing the nitric oxide delivery, the Viagra is a kind of a one and done. It's kind of like caffeine, good upside, bad downside, and the side effects are a problem. So and super beets, I'm so grateful for beets because beets are safe, but how many people can eat a bushel basket of beets all day long? Or who wants to buy and wash and clean, or who wants to ingest, 5 pounds of kale throughout the day? It doesn't taste that great. But
now, when you say super beets, are you meaning the company?
I'm just talking about, Super Beets has done a good job of marketing, and they talk about nitric oxide and everything else. But it's a 2 hour to 3 hour window that beets stimulate the nitric oxide. So the secret was in connecting the dots, and Nature Sunshine was one of the first to do that with their first formulation, was that you need to have citrulline with the arginine. The citrulline is in your body, when you take citrulline, in addition to arginine stimulates nitric oxide. It's the number one stimulant of nitric oxide. Citrulline becomes arginine as it synthesizes through your organs. And so citrulline will extend the nitric oxide. And then there was a discovery called estrogen that has panax ginseng and astragalus root. And they found that extended nitric oxide by 50%. And they clinically proved that. And then they found that hawthorn berry and grapeseed extract and vitamin D helped extend nitric oxide. So all of these things to try to safely have nitric oxide be delivered 24 hours of the day were a matter of putting several ingredients together that would stimulate but then extend. And so
kind of like a time release kind of thing. They talk about time medication.
Exactly.
This is like a time release. You take it in the morning, I'm guessing, or whatever.
Morning and then at night again, 12 hours apart. So when I developed my protocol, I knew that I could get 8 to 12 hours out of each dose. I knew that because of what I'd learned from so many other things. So I thought 2 doses a day would solve the problem. Then I engaged the top scientist in the world, Tadeusz Smolinski, the University of Ohio, who has a nanosensor who can literally take a single endothelial cell 100 times smaller than the human hair, and he can measure its nitric oxide expression. And
wow.
He's the only one in the world who can do it. And he made the discovery that I'm sure you probably remember. You remember when probably about 5 years ago when they said, vitamin D has a dramatic impact on cardiovascular disease. And there was a published paper on that. And all of a sudden, everyone was going crazy. Oh, my gosh, vitamin D is great for cardiovascular health. Well, guess who wrote the paper? Tadeusz Smolinski. He's the one who figured it out at the cellular level that vitamin D had an impact on cardiovascular disease. I read the study, and I sent him an email. I didn't know him from, of course, he certainly didn't know me. I sent him an email saying, I believe that I've developed the finest safe delivery of nitric oxide in the world. Along with your vitamin D research, I would like to come and meet you and talk to you. I got a call the very next day from his PhD assistant, and he said, Professor Smolinski got 500, 800 emails, and he wants to talk to you. I said he was really shocked. Well, I believe it was, I think, the spirit or something hit him over the head and said, call this clown out in St. George, Utah, and talk to him. So I was in St. George for that winter, and he called me on the phone, and he sounded like something out of a movie because he speaks like 12 languages, but he's Polish, and so kind of has broken English, and plus he's like talking to Albert Einstein, and so we were talking on the phone, and he goes, well, and he says, well, tell me, Professor, what is your background? And I said, well, first of all, I said, University of Utah, 1973, 5 hours short of graduation. I said, I'm not a professor. I'm not a doctor. He says, how did you learn this? And I said, just from a lot of smart people like you, Professor, I want to meet you. He says, well, come back and meet me. So we booked a flight and we went to Cincinnati and drove to Athens, Ohio, and sat down with him. And after about 20 minutes, he looked at me, and I mean, he's like 75, 76 years old, and he's so smart, it's scary. I mean, the pocket protector is like radiating out of his pocket. He's that smart, if you remember. So he's turned to my wife and he goes, John is a genius, and he doesn't have a clue why. He says, this compound is amazing. And he looked at the ingredients, and he says, because he had been kind of just making up his own stuff, that he had been taking his vitamin D and his amino acids and all that kind of stuff to help his immune system. So I said, well, I'd like to test my compound. He calls it my compound. He said, I'd like to test my compound under your science. And he goes, well, it's very expensive. And I said, give me the best deal you can. I'm committed. I want it. He goes, well, what if it doesn't work? I said, that's why I'm here. I want to know. I want to know how long this stimulates nitric oxide safely. And he goes, you're a very interesting person. And I said, I really want to know. And so he told me how much it would cost, and it was more money than we could afford. And I just made it happen. I went and pulled the money together and gave a grant to the university. 3 weeks later, he called me up and he said, I'm astounded. He said, your compound extends nitric oxide for over 24 hours. He said, I've never seen this before. And I said, that's great. And he says, but even more interesting is he says, most nitric oxide causes, because it flashes so fast, it collides in the body with other gases and creates a free radical called peroxynitrite, which is the most damaging free radical in the body. This is why the bodybuilders who were taking handfuls of arginine, stimulating this big nitric oxide burst, were getting a great pump and getting physical, but they're frying their microcapillaries at the same time because it was just too much. He said, your compound creates nitric oxide for over 24 hours. It reduces the free radicals by over 50%. He said, it's unheard of. I can't believe it.
Because of the other stuff that you have in there also.
He says it's got to be because of all these other antioxidants and anti-inflammatories that you've put in. And so when I got involved with formulating this 9 years ago, I knew that antioxidants were important. I knew the vitamin B12 was important to buffer, because I'd heard that from some really smart professors and people. B12 helped buffer the excess nitric oxide, and it helps scavenge up anything beyond what the body can use that's bioavailable. And so, but I literally had, through some various people, you know my friend Dr. Brad Nelson, but his wife, one day I was asking her to test some of my samples, and she says, you need to put in some organic fruit like this stuff I have in my pantry. And so we put in some coconut water and a few things. Well, I went to the place that made the organic fruits and vegetables, and that's where I found the finest source at the time of beets, carrots, blueberries, coconut water, raspberries, and we put all of that in. And when I took it to my manufacturer, he goes, you're putting in this stuff? He said, this stuff's really expensive. And I said, yeah, well, it's okay. He says, what? Don't you want to make this inexpensively? I said, I want the best compound in the world that's fairly priced. That's what I want. I said, cheap doesn't work for me. This is a mission. I said, I want something that works. So the good news was Professor Malinsky published right at the beginning of COVID, 2022. At the same time, Patrick Gentempo and Jeff Hayes featured my product and myself on nitric oxide with Supplements Revealed, went worldwide. At the very same time, we published the paper internationally with a nutritional journal on Professor Malinsky's findings of us extending nitric oxide safely for 24 hours, and the fact that it reduced the free radical damage, and it had a dramatic impact on atherosclerosis and all the other things. So since then, things have kind of gotten a little crazy. And so I then decided to move on this last year and invested in analytics, Emergence Analyticals, which is one of the premier evaluators of artificial intelligence. And we've now tested all of the ingredients against 15 million points of data in artificial intelligence. And we just published our first paper on heart disease, atherosclerosis, kidney disease. And they even mentioned the name of this thing that's been going on for the last couple of years as being product specific, that my formulation has a dramatic impact on, their words, not mine, on all 2,700 known chronic illnesses and diseases.
You know, right now we hear a lot about heart disease, but heart disease has been one of the leading killers. And I know, like, everybody has had.
Well, her dad tell you to.
Yeah,
her dad was the first one to have, as a 66-year-old male, he had a heart transplant.
Really?
So he was the very first one that they did out of UCLA to be able to use a defective heart, because you know that after the age of 65, this was, like 15 years ago.
30 years ago.
Yeah.
It was when in a chiropractic.
Yeah, 30 years ago that
Wow.
you could not get a heart transplant. So he was the very first one
Wow.
to be able to get the
Amazing.
heart transplant that was over the age of 65. And, with him, it extended his life another 15 years. But he had heart problems for a very long time.
Your dad wasn't Dick Headley, was it?
No, no.
Richard Headley was one of the top insurance people in the world. He was from Richfield, Utah, and he became one of the top people. And I remember when Dick got his heart transplant, it had to be 25, 30 years ago, and it extended his life greatly. The thing that's interesting, and that's a whole nother topic for another time, is how often with the transplant, the people, their dietary things, people all of a sudden started liking Mexican food and like different type of,
they have that person's heart.
different type of music. I mean, I've read all the great stuff about it. I mean, it really is amazing. The heart is the brain. It is everything in the body. It really has such a dramatic, but you're right, Liz. And actually for the purpose of health, talking to your viewers of this, one of the biggest concerns I have is the fact that women spend all of their time worrying about their men's blood pressure and chest pains and other things. And yet it's the leading cause, heart disease and heart attacks, leading cause of death among women, not breast cancer. Heart attacks are, heart failure, heart problems, as for men, both of them. But the reality is the caregiving side, that more women need to make sure they're getting their adequate vitamin D and their adequate nitric oxide, because stress, fear, those things all diminish your nitric oxide and your vitamin D. And so,
well, and also it probably doesn't even show up always in heart problems. It probably shows up a lot in autoimmunes for the women.
Absolutely shows up first as chronic fatigue, lupus. We're seeing a lot of things.
Thyroid, Hashimoto's.
Hashimoto's fact, and it's been really fun the last couple of months. I've been working with a number of different groups, and they send in their testimonials and all of that kind of stuff. And we're seeing now, their words, not mine, we're seeing benefits from elevating nitric oxide and vitamin D, Lyme's disease, Hashimoto's, chronic fatigue, fibromyalgia, lupus, adrenal failure, irritable bowel, Crohn's disease, all of these autoimmune types of MS. We're seeing symptoms. See, as you know, because you guys have been leaders in the medical and health professional type of world, all an autoimmune disease, all the diseases is a types of symptoms that somebody somewhere gave a name to it. They're all just different bunches of symptoms that they say, well, this is what that is. That's Hashimoto's, or that's irritable, that's this or that. And from your work in the colon and the bowels and the inflammatory situation there, but that there's all these problems, gut flora and everything else. But really, if you boil it all down, it all comes down to, are the capillaries inflamed or are they functioning properly? And that leads to then this domino effect of other symptoms that become a problem. So if you can repair and support good capillary health and nutrition being delivered to the cell, only good things can happen with all of these other things that might be affecting your autoimmune situation.
So I have a question for you. We haven't talked about this at all, but I'm imagining from what you're saying and everything you're doing, this is actually one of the best things you can do for brain health as well. Is that correct?
Well, you're a smart guy, Dr. Shane. That's the topic.
Well, yeah, I don't know if my wife would say that, but
well, but let's say you're chiropractic smart. But my next study that I hope will be done next month is through the artificial intelligence, is the dramatic impact of safe delivered nitric oxide and lower free radicals on brain health, cognitive function, and all of the brain-related diseases and problems. That's
like your Alzheimer's, your dementias. Are you guys doing a study right now on that?
I've got the artificial intelligence guys just validate. There's no question in my mind. See, one of the funny things is when I started with these artificial intelligence guys, and it's not an ego thing to me. I'm just on a mission for what it's worth. But I'm talking to this PhD scientist in Austria, and a year ago in October, I said, Professor, I want to prove now that the vitamin D absorption is tied to nitric oxide. And you guys will find this very interesting. I said, I believe that my compound helps deliver vitamin D better than any other way. And he goes, oh, that's nonsense. I said, well, that's okay, but I'm paying you to do the study. So do the study and prove me wrong. 2 weeks later, dear John, I apologize. You were right. I was wrong. He said, your compound accelerates the absorption of vitamin D beyond anything that I have ever seen or found in the literature. And in August, we published that paper with Frontiers in Nutrition out of Europe, which is the third most cited nutritional journal in the world. Published the article, and it says that this compound creates a feedback loop, that the extended nitric oxide creates bioavailable vitamin D. It grabs the inert vitamin D being stored in the fat cells and releases it from jail, essentially, from bondage that it's being stored for. And then that release stimulates more nitric oxide, which releases more vitamin D, which stimulates more nitric oxide. And it creates this centrifugal force in the body physiologically of increasing the availability of vitamin D3. And that explained why my wife, who was vitamin D deficient 9 years ago when I met her and married her, she was at a 32 in her vitamin D blood analysis. And within a year, she was at 84. And she had spent years taking 5,000, 10,000, taking mega doses of D, and barely moved the needle from the high 20s to the low 30s. And in 1 year on this product, it went from 32 to 84.
Well, and like with vitamin D, that they say for people that have like MS, that for some reason their body's not absorbing the vitamin D, and they don't know if MS is actually stimulated from low vitamin Ds, or if that your body just isn't able, because you have MS, not able to absorb it.
It's probably both. But see, one of the things that happens is, and so this was one of the interesting things about our scientific study that was published just in August. It's been mind-blowing. I mean, when you talk to Dr. Judy Mikovits, or you talk to Dr. David Martin, or you talk to Ryan Cole or Brian Artis, I mean, these are really smart guys, Patrick Gentempo. When they see this published study, they are blown away. They said, we've never seen anything like this. And I said, well, I didn't even know. I didn't even know what artificial intelligence was 2 years ago. I had no idea what it was. I heard people talking about AI. Well, the only AI I knew was a driving school in Holiday, Utah. I didn't know anything about what artificial intelligence was. So
No, that's
And that was
A1.
A1.
Oh, it's A1. Okay, well, whatever.
Because that's where I took
Okay.
there
So
too.
that's how clueless I was about artificial intelligence, because I knew nothing about it. So when a guy says to me, hey, pay me 20, 30,000 a month to do some AI work for you, I'm like, I don't even know what it is or how you do that. And then I hear, of course, people say, well, you don't want to, it's part of the communist plot or whatever. Well, the thing that I thought is, I don't have that much confidence in double-blind random studies, because the pharmaceutical companies, I don't trust them. I think they've
destroyed science.
They've destroyed it.
No
They say they are science, but then they've destroyed it at the same time. But on the other hand, this artificial intelligence was interesting as they finally explained it to me, because I had to pay for it. As they said, we can go through every research paper, every thesis, every clinical trial that's ever been done that's in the current library of mankind, and compare what we're looking for. And I said, sounds good to me. So I said, I guess that's why it's so expensive. And so we invested, we've invested over $300,000 in these last couple of studies, but it has been like grand slam after grand slam after grand slam. And it was funny because this scientist, he said, well, I'll come back and tell you which parts of your formula are harmful. I said, great, I'm all ears. Whatever I can do. If I can simplify, I'd love to. And he came back and he goes, it's like a grand orchestra. It works beautifully together. The artificial intelligence says it works like a symphony. I said, great. That's great. So you haven't been able to figure out how I could do this with 5 or 6 ingredients? He goes, I've never seen anything like this. And I said, great. He says, when can you send me some more? He says, I want to start taking it in Austria. So that's kind of been the adventure that we've been on, that's been really, really exciting and gratifying. And so when people call me and they go, you're not going to believe this. And I said, well, after 15 years, I've seen so many wonderful things happen that I'm just grateful. I'm just grateful that we have hope and some answers. And the most critical part right now, I believe, is, if you don't want to understand nitric oxide and safe delivery, fine. But you want to raise your D level. You want to make sure your D is in that 50, 60, 70, 80, 90 range. You want to have a strong immune system so that regardless of what's going on around you, and there's a lot of stuff going on. I mean, the last 2 years, I had the sniffles for 2 days. I had a sore throat for one day, fighting off whatever the heck it is that's going on. And I just take 4 doses of Cardio Miracle, and I took a little horse paste, a little ivermectin, and I haven't missed a beat in 2.5 years. And I have all the comorbidities, family history of heart disease, too short for my weight, stress, travel a lot.
I need to use that one. That's a great one.
The other one, the two.
I'm too short for my weight.
The other one, I had a guy once who said, he says, you're not overweight, you're just under tall. And I said, well, that's true. I said, if I was 7 foot, I'd be fine. But so I'm over 70 years old. I should have died.
You're in that category.
I should have died. And yet I work circles around most people. I am happily engaged in helping to heal the hearts of mankind. That's what I do. And it's been unbelievably gratifying to see the calls. And every day. I get them every day from people saying, my father who couldn't do this is now doing this. My grandma who couldn't walk from the kitchen to her bedroom is now walking, and whatever. My so-and-so's off their supplemental oxygen. So-and-so's migraine cluster headaches went away. People say, it's too good to be true. I said, well, no, it's just common sense. If you deliver oxygen more efficiently, if you reduce the inflammatory condition, if you increase blood flow and adequate absorption of nutrition, only good things can happen. And the endothelial cells, if you took all the endothelial cells, it would cover 6 tennis courts. in your body. It's really important. And is it any wonder that if you do believe that there may be something sinister going on around here, what would be the most valuable place to be attacked? It would be the endothelial cells. Well, guess what? I believe God gave us the discovery of nitric oxide to prevent and to help us through whatever the heck's going on out there. And that's our mission. And my fight is to help people know there's hope, and you need to take care of those endothelial cells. You need to take.
So one other question, one question for you is, you mentioned vitamin D a lot.
Yeah.
Does your product have vitamin D
Absolutely.
in it, or is
yeah? Because
it does.
In my opinion, the simultaneous delivery of therapeutic vitamin D doesn't have to be 10,000 units, because I believe that what we've now proven with the science that
is that it already uploads it better, so you don't need as
5-6 times more absorbable. So we have 1,500 units, and that's been the number that I felt was right, and the results have been staggering. But the scientist was so excited about this feedback loop between D and I knew there was a connection. I just didn't know that they were Siamese twins. I mean, they are like the 1-2 punch together. And so that's why, people can take 10,000 units. They can go and get IVs. If you're not elevating your nitric oxide at the same time or within hours, you're just getting expensive urine. It's not efficient. So elevating the nitric oxide safely, which is what I believe that we've done with kind of our time release aspect, and the vitamin D is what's most critical. And that's why we're seeing people there are people who take this and they say, everyone thinks that I look 10 years younger. Why is that? Well, what do you think collagen and the skin and the dermis it's all about circulation. It's all about microcapillaries. The whole world is about microcapillaries. And then from the chiropractic side that you might find interesting, people say, well, the chiropractic adjustments are lasting longer. People are getting better results. I just got a fantastic video this morning from Devin Greiner, the plastic surgeon who sued Fauci over them trying to take away his medical privileges, and he sued Biden. He just sent out a video saying, we're seeing people's healing faster from their surgery. Well, and my son Jason, who had a horrific knee injury, he's been given a clearance. They told him he would probably never be able to play basketball again. And after 12 weeks, they've given him clearance to do almost whatever he wants. Crazy. So the recovery from knee replacement, hip replacement, cesarean section.
Oh, we should have been talking to you like 4 months ago before she had her knee replacement.
Well,
Holy cow.
Seriously. And let me tell you one other interesting thing, just for future reference. When you get a replacement, they put in titanium or steel or whatever. Mm-hmm. The reason the complications, and we haven't proven this yet with the artificial intelligence, we will. It's next down the line. But the bacteria can accumulate on that foreign object. And so the ischemia and the inflammation and the complications when people do replace a knee or a hip or a shoulder, when they do have the complication, I think about 25% have the complication. I believe the nitric oxide is the body's greatest natural anti-inflammatory. And so because of that, it will and antioxidant, it will attack and get rid of that. And the other thing that's interesting that you would find as probably dealing with some sports medicine is one of the most critical parts of nitric oxide is it increases the lymphatic contraction. So, and that comes back to when we were talking a minute ago about cognitive and brain health. If you're increasing the blood flow and keeping those arteries healthy in the brain, it's equally important to make sure the lymphatic drainage is working effectively to get the garbage out of the brain as well. That's where I believe myself, again, not scientist here, I believe that's where the amyloid plaque and all of those issues that have talked about with dementia, Alzheimer's, those types of things accumulate. I believe it's because of the compromised peripheral arteries in the brain, those capillaries, but also compromising of the lymphatic system in the brain, because if you can't get the garbage out, it's going to accumulate, and that accumulation, I think, has probably some impact. So it used to be that amyloid plaques were always the answer. They said, well, this is what is this, the problem with Alzheimer's, dementia. And then say, no, it's inflammation. No, it's this. No, it's that. No, it's all of the above. And all of the above, in my opinion, are capillary and lymphatic system related. If you keep the good stuff coming in and the bad stuff going out, I think you're going to go a long ways to solving the problem.
So, John, where can people find you and, read more about your, Cardio Miracle? And
we didn't talk about this, but we probably should have asked it before is there a discount code if somebody listens to the podcast that they can use to buy it through you guys somehow,
or something like? Should give you one if you'd like.
We haven't talked about that before. We probably should have done that.
Yeah, absolutely. What we probably ought to. What would Be Healthy is. What would be a good promo code, and I'll make sure that somebody sets one up for you.
Yeah, we can just do Be Healthy.
Okay. If that's your kind of one of your taglines. So let's just say Be Healthy will be the promo code, and they can get a discount for their initial trial. Where am I going to be? You asked Liz. I'll probably be somewhere on I-15 between Utah, California, and Florida. I-15 doesn't go to Florida. I guess it goes north, but I-70 or I-10. But no, we're pretty busy. It's been quite the adventure. And
they just go into your website. That's kind of what she was asking. How can
So our website is cardiomiracle.com. Cardiomiracle.com. We are on Amazon, but it's a full price on Amazon. You get a better deal if you use the Be Healthy promo code that we're going to set up for your listeners that like to try it. We do have an unconditional money back guarantee, and guess what? Almost nobody ever takes it. A few scammers try to get away with, getting things for nothing. But no, our results are so staggering that most people go, how did I ever live without this product before? So that's kind of interesting. But our best deal that we save for our subscription customers. So if you do want to try it, go in, use the Be Healthy promo code so that they know who you are, or put it in the notes, or you call the 800 number and tell them. But our subscription program, part of my commitment as I left the direct sales world was I wanted the best value for the customer. So we give our biggest discount to the regular customer, free shipping and points, ends up being almost 30% off, which is kind of ridiculous with the margins we have, which are so small comparatively. But you know what? Almost everybody reorders, and our business is thriving. We've doubled and tripled during the last 2 years, and it's blowing up, and the word's getting out, and these scientific studies have just, people are saying, I guess the old Undertall guy is right. This stuff actually works. So we're kind of...
Well, John, we want to thank you so much. We could go on talking forever. Most of our podcasts are like 30 minutes. I think we've been talking with you for over an hour, but it's awesome. I mean, and the nice thing that we found out, most people are involved in our conference are there because they had something themselves have an issue.
Sure.
That's why they sell a product or do a service of something, because they had it. And that's exactly what happened to you. You just had the wherewithal to be able to say, okay, I'm going to figure this out, and I'm going to try to make the best product I can so that it helps the world. It can even help these, too short for their, not tall. I'm not tall enough for my weight, is what.
Well, some of us workaholic types don't take as much time to pose in the mirror and try to look good on the beach. We're trying too hard to save mankind or whatever. So maybe a lame excuse.
But thank you so much. Thank you so much for being on our podcast. We appreciate your time. I know you're extremely busy, and we just are just grateful that what you've done to try and create something that is a natural alternative, but can help so many different things.
Well, thank you. It's been a pleasure to be with you, and we'll look forward to being a part of your conference. You're doing great work, and we want to support people like yourselves that are trying to make a big difference in human health, mobility, and happiness. Because if you don't have your health, you don't have anything. And so a lot of people say, well, It's kind of expensive compared to what? I mean, when you're laying in bed with a flaming sore throat or a migraine headache, what price will you pay to feel better? And yet, for a couple of dollars a day, and one of the good things is we're able to replace, in most cases, about 75% of the supplements that most people aren't getting much value out of. And so when you really look at it, being healthy can save you money, and it actually helps with intermittent fasting, which is very strange, whole nother topic. So you can go without a meal easily and maybe not be as under tall as you should be. So that could all work. So.
Well, maybe we'll have to have you on for another time.
There's plenty to talk about, and we're delighted to do it. And you're a great couple, and appreciate all the good things that you're trying to do. So we're anxious to try to be a part of your moving forward to help as many people as possible.